Outlaw Sports is brought to you by Molson Canadian, made from Canada, and Rocky Mountain Barbecue, Alberta barbecue cuisine at its best. Grant Pollock's behind the scenes today, monitoring us and giving me shit, actually, for the Rambo thing. And I had it on pretty good authority that he had ACL problems, MCL problems, probably was done. But here he is making a gutsy effort and didn't look too bad against Winnipeg.
Looks like he still has that burst to the outside that can really do some damage, that 54-yard reception, and then defensive back on his back for 10 yards. Of course, it's only Brandon Stewart, who weighs about 110 pounds soaking wet. So that is a really good sign for the Stamps that they've got Rambo back. He was creating some separation, and he was giving them another weapon, and you saw what happened when they got a guy who can burn on the outside and give them a chance to move some guys like Johnny Frazani inside. Nice looking play call, and it worked well.
So why do you think do you think this is just his last shot and he's going to play through the pain no matter what it costs?
Well, I wouldn't know if it was his last shot, but it's his best shot for a while.
Sure.
And he's obviously pushing it to the point where this is a playoff run. They've got a team that can win the Grey Cup this year, and he sees that. And when you get a chance to win the Grey Cup and it's week 19, you got to go for it.
Yep.
And over the last few weeks, he needed to prove to John Hufnagel that he was himself enough that he could get in there and actually make some plays. And I think he proved that. And he proved it in practice, and he went and proved it in a game, and now they've got a good shot going into the playoffs.
Let's talk about some of the matchups this weekend, the two different matchups. We talked earlier about the Stampeders and Eskimos. Let's look at the Owls and Ticats. Talk about a couple of teams backing into the playoffs. Montreal is the biggest surprise of them all. How many? 3 straight losses, I believe?
3 straight losses. First time since 2008, week 3 through 5.
Yeah.
When that was the start of the Mark Trestman era, and since then they haven't lost 3 in a row. Every time they get to 2 losses, they rebound and they pick up wins.
But it's how they're losing.
It's how they're losing,
wow.
right? It's wow. They go into, and that's why people say, well, Hamilton, they backed in, they were awful. Well, what did they need to prove in the last 2 weeks of the season? They couldn't change their standing.
I would want some solid performances from one of 2 quarterbacks.
Right, but they're playing them both just to get them fresh and warm for the playoffs. They didn't need to win those games, and it reminded me a lot of the Saskatchewan Roughriders last year, where the last 4 games of the Riders season last year did not mean a thing. It was the last 4, and then the last week they really tried hard to win that game. This team wasn't worried about winning the games. They just weren't.
Okay.
They went into Regina, and it's a whipping wind, and we just don't really feel like playing that day. And then they lose in Toronto Toronto wants to go out on a good note, and they did. And they pulled Kevin Glenn at halftime. Had they wanted to win that game, Kevin Glenn would have stayed in the whole game. I'm sure of that.
But
So I'm thinking that Montreal is the team that has most question marks going in.
Fair enough.
For the biggest reason is Josh Bork, their left tackle, who's the most dominating left tackle in the league, and should hands down be the winner of the Outstanding Lineman Award. Now, depending on what those morons in the Montreal market vote, they didn't even vote him unanimous. I have no idea how that worked.
Yep.
And we could go all day about Jamel Richardson versus Anthony Calvillo.
Well, Jesus Christ, what's up with that?
Yeah, well, let's get that out in a bit.
Well, we will address that.
But with Josh Bork out, they had to move Jeff Parrott over and play a rookie in McCullough. And that just didn't work out. Anthony Calvillo was under siege against the BC Lions. He's going to be under siege against Stevie Baggs and Justin Hipken. Those 2 guys are as good as the guys that the Lions throw out.
Yeah.
They're going to put pressure on Anthony Calvillo. And Anthony he looks beat up right now. He's getting roughed up too much. And when he's getting roughed up, not getting the time he wants, he can wilt. And that's what's happened this year. And that's why it's just insane that he's going to be the East Division most outstanding player. He's the 3rd best choice on his own team this year.
He is. Richardson should have won that. Should have won it in the East, I think.
Yeah.
And
well, he should have won it overall.
Overall,
I was just like,
this
was a season like no other. In that he had 12 100-yard games out of 16 games that he had played. Now, in his 17th game, he had 2 catches for 5 yards, but the Montreal offense was putrid that whole game. So I thought it was just a travesty. And had somebody voted for Brandon Whitaker instead of Anthony Calvillo or Jamel Richardson, I would have said that's a decent argument to be made. He had 1,900 yards from scrimmage, and he was the most outstanding running back in the league this year.
They got to quit giving the votes to people that aren't watching games.
Well, and that's the thing. And if they're voting on Calvillo for his records that he broke this year, those are historical records.
Yeah.
The records that Jamel Richardson set are all-time records in a single season, and ones that are going to be really hard to duplicate. Can you imagine somebody coming out with 1,300-yard games?
Yeah.
That's just outstanding.
Getting one more point I want to talk about this series before we give predictions. The last meaningful game Hamilton has won was against Montreal. They've just been backing up. I just don't trust them. I don't trust them. And from week to week, you never know what you're getting. So
well, the last meaningful game Hamilton won?
Yeah.
Well, they beat BC pretty hard 3 weeks ago. In their final home game.
Yeah, I guess so.
It was their final home game.
Yeah.
And it was their last chance for their fans to say, okay, what kind of team do we have? They went out and they put the boots to the BC Lions on an 8-game winning streak. So
my apologies, but before that?
Before that? Well, I think you might be thinking about Winnipeg. The last game Winnipeg that was impressive was 2 weeks ago against Montreal.
Still Hamilton, other than that BC game. Yeah. I mean, you just never know. I mean,
well, they are you never know team, but I think they've been building towards this point. They knew about a month and a half ago that they weren't going to change their positioning. They weren't going to go on a 7-game winning streak to finish out the year and win first place. So they've basically been resigned to this quarterback system. They're trying to make sure Quentin Porter is nice and ready to go in case he's needed. You know, remember what happened? The last time Kevin Glenn led a team to the Grey Cup, he didn't actually get to play in the Grey Cup because he broke his arm in the East Final.
That's right. Okay, so are you still comfortable enough to put money down on Hamilton?
Well, your money? I'll put tons of your money down.
Sure. I still like Montreal at home. I still like Montreal at home. And Calvillo's experience. I know, but his experience come playoff time.
Right.
I don't want to see it for the betterment of the league. I'd like to see their asses out of the playoffs, but for the betterment of the league, and I just could not watch another Montreal Grey Cup.
Oh, God, no. Please. Out of the 9 Grey Cup matchups, aren't the 3 worst ones the 3 that involve the Montreal Alouettes? Yeah.
So who are you going with?
I'll take the Ticats by a field goal.
Okay.
Is that the end of the segment?
That's the end.
Can utility be a poster? Can utility keep you up at night, dreaming? Can utility put thoughts in your head? Depends on what you mean by utility. Introducing the new Porsche Cayenne and Cayenne S Hybrid. Lighter, more agile, more efficient. More Porsche than ever.